Hello my beautiful watchers and welcome to Lost in Adaptation, the internet review show themed around comparing film adaptations to their source material to see how closely they stuck to it. This is the third and final episode I'm doing to discuss the evolution of the Phantom of the Opera as it transitioned from book to musical theatre and then onto the big screen. The first two episodes in which I covered the book and how the musical adapted its plot can be found here. I would recommend watching them first if you haven't already, so you can get the full context of what I'm going to be talking about in this video. The Phantom of the Opera was a 2004 film written and produced by the musical's creator, Andrew Lloyd Webber. It was originally announced as far back as 1989, but development issues partly brought about by Lloyd Webber's personal life delayed things all the way through the 90s and into the next millennium. Lloyd Webber managed to hold on to complete creative control throughout this whole process, partly by sinking millions of dollars of his own money into the project. He personally selected Joel Schumacher to direct right from the start due to admiration for his, at the time, recent movie Lost Boys. The other, significantly less popular movies he directed in the 17-year delay apparently didn't change Lloyd Webber's mind on the matter, so Schumacher was still in the chair when production finally began. As you can no doubt imagine from this very long pre-production, the intended cast changed multiple times. The plan was to bring back the very first Christine and Phantom from the original run of the musical, Michael Crawford and Lloyd Webber's wife, Sarah Brightman. Unfortunately, the personal problems I mentioned before pertained to a messy divorce between her and Lloyd Webber in 1990, so that was out. When the film finally got off the ground the better part of 2 decades later, the leading roles were offered to Anne Hathaway and Hugh Jackman. Both were known for their musical talent, but both were unavailable due to scheduling conflicts on other films. They eventually cast Emmy Rossum, an at the time 16-year-old actress, as Christine, and against all conceivable logic, Gerard Butler, a man with zero singing experience, as the Phantom. The film received mostly negative reviews from critics, and loathing ranging from mild to utter from the Phantom fandom. The former took issue with the incredibly boring, borderline incompetent directing, the washed-out-looking colours, the crowded-looking shots, and in general sloppy production, and the latter were understandably upset that a character whose single biggest character trait was being a mad musical genius couldn't sing very well. Despite this, the film was a commercial success and was nominated for multiple Academy Awards, because that's just how life and the Oscars work sometimes. Personal story, I'm nervous to admit that this was my first introduction to Phantom, and I actually quite enjoyed it at the time, because even though the directing was bad and the singing was a bit naff, I thought the lyrics and music were just amazing. I later came to realise that this is the equivalent of only watching The Phantom Menace and claiming it's a good film because the Force and lightsabers are really cool concepts. Yes, it's technically true, but there are so many better ways to enjoy these things, and once you've seen them done justice to, you can't really go back to enjoying the thing you saw originally, so the only thing I'll say in this film's defense is I kind of like some of the symmetry of the shots. Also, fun fact, that is Ramin Karimloo in the portrait of Christine's father, meaning this guy has technically played him, the Phantom, and Raoul at some point or another. As I mentioned in episodes past, this is a comparison of the film to the play, because even a cursory glance at it makes it super clear that this is an adaptation of the adaptation and not a fresh take on the original book. However, I reserve the right to make the odd reference to the book here and there if I so choose. Just in case it wasn't clear, even though I'm going to be using clips of the Royal Albert Hall, this is not a direct comparison of it and this film, the obvious reason being that that particular performance took place 7 years after the film in 2011. I'm just using the 25-year anniversary to represent the musical as a whole because it's the best recording of it. Righty-ho, let's talk adaptation. Starting the story a good couple of decades after the events of the main plot, at an auction being held in the decrepit remains of the once fine opera house. An elderly Raoul bidding on that bloody monkey and claiming that Christine described it to him. Lot 666, the chandelier, and the transition it leads to, jumping the narrative back into the past and restoring the opera house to its former glory. Starting the plot in earnest midway through a rehearsal of Hannibal and the changeover of ownership of the venue to, slight admission, I missed a change in the last episode. Apparently Firmin Richard and Armand Montchemar's names were changed to Richard Firmin and Giles Andre in the musical, presumably to make it easier to work their names into certain songs, and it's the same here in the film. Anyways, a backdrop suspiciously falling during a song by the show's star La Carlotta, causing her to storm out, and after a quick panic, Christine Daae, one of the extras, stepping in to fill her role to great success. The Viscount Raoul de Charny, the new official patron of the opera house, seeing her from the audience and recognizing her as his childhood friend and love interest. Christine telling her BFF Meg Giry that she can sing so fucking good because she's been getting lessons from a mysterious voice from the dark that she believes to be an angel of music and or her dead father's spirit. A happy reunion between Christine and Raoul where the young Viscount is nice but not really receptive to understanding that Christine is not talking metaphorically about being visited by an angel. The opera ghost and or angel and or deceased daddy showing up in her mirror and leading her through the hidden door inside it. The hidden home under the opera house on the shore of a subterranean lake. Christine making the, it turns out to be rather poor decision to find out what's under the mask that her tutor is wearing. The Phantom's super quick turnaround between rage that she saw his face, his crushing sadness about his hideousness, and his decision not to keep Christine forever just yet. Joseph Bouquet, the stagehand, scaring the crap out of people with phantom stories that he himself doesn't take seriously, and Madame Giry, Meg's mother and the choreographer of the ballet dancers, telling him to shut the fuck up. The letters signed by the opera ghost being delivered to Farmine and Andre about his salary, to Raoul about Christine being fine, don't worry about it, and also stay away from her, I call dibs, and to Carlotta demanding that she permanently relinquish her leading role to the younger star. Farmine and Andre doubling down on ignoring their ghosty goo and sucking up to Carlotta until she agrees to come back and sing the leading role in the next production. In response to this, the Phantom working some trickery to make nothing but croaking escape Carlotta's mouth and murdering Bouquet and dropping his body down to hang from a noose over the stage. Christine leading Raoul up to the roof to tell him how frightened she is of the opera ghost, leading to them admitting their love for one another. Something that is most upsetting for the eavesdropping ghost in question. The masquerade party in the opera house in which Raoul and Christine loudly talk about their quote-unquote secret engagement right in front of people and disagree on Raoul's wish to make it not secret. The Phantom making a surprise appearance dressed in his red death duds to hand over the opera he's written. Madame Giry admitting to Raoul that she knows more about their mysterious Phantom than she's been letting on. The OG's backstory being revealed to have involved escaping from a carnival freak show that he was being held in against his will. Christine making a trip to her father's crypt, which is apparently located in a graveyard nearby. The Phantom having another go at luring her to him by strongly implying that he is the ghost of her father, and despite knowing it's not true, Christine wanting it to be so just enough to fall back under his spell. Raoul turning up just in time to remind her that it is poppycock of the highest degree. With his last attempt of failure, the Phantom declaring war upon them both. Raoul talking the managers into going ahead with a performance of the Phantom of the Opera's opera in the opera so they can fill the house with armed men with itchy trigger fingers. This proving to be a dumb idea because it gives the OG a perfect opportunity to murder the male lead and replace him, getting all up in Christine's business until she decides to yoink his mask in front of everyone. The Phantom kidnapping her, Raoul directed to his lair by Madame Giry trying and failing to rescue her and becoming leverage for the OG to try to blackmail Christine into marrying him. Christine saving the day with a sexist smooch that makes the Phantom realize the error of his ways and let them both go. Meg and the other search parties finding nothing but his mask to remember their ghosty goodbye. The lyrics to all of the songs and almost all the dialogue are word for word lifted from the play. Not surprisingly, as it was the new central theme of Lloyd Webber's Phantom, Christine still wants that ghost daddy dick just so bad! Okay, so due to the three-stage nature of this adaptation, there are a few things in this film that are a little too complicated to be able to easily sort into the not changed or changed categories. I have it on good authority that there were a few things from the book that Lloyd Webber wanted to put in the stage production back in the 80s but couldn't for logistical reasons. He appears to have used this film as his second chance to include these things. The stolen underground horse is the first example that comes to mind. Eric better be getting that poor beast some sunlight every now and again or he's going to lose all the sympathy that the stage version of him managed to build. Raoul hears the Phantom's voice inside Christine's dressing room when he comes to collect her. You hear the Phantom playing a violin in the Dai crypt for at least a few seconds before he starts singing instead. It's possible that the crazy hallway of golden human arms holding candlesticks is a reference to Eric drugging Christine so she'd be tripping balls during their journey to his home and wouldn't remember the way back. However, that might just be wishful thinking on my part as I attempt to reconcile this scene. Raoul now falls into an Indiana Jones style booby trap that probably would have been more deadly if the means to switch it off wasn't easily accessible from inside it. I consider this a reference to the many traps that the Persian helped Raoul avoid in the book. The torture chamber that featured so heavily in the climax of the book is sort of included now, but I say that almost begrudgingly because 1. It's presented as a Hall of Mirrors style illusion room instead of a deadly microwave. 2. It's directly under the foyer floor now, which makes less than no sense. And 3. There's once again no chance that the Phantom is the architect behind the opera house, so how the balls does this even exist? It would have made me so happy if he'd also used this adaptation as a chance to reinsert the Ratcatcher, but alas, he is still not in the story. I'll remember you, Ratcatcher. I'll remember you. The exact time setting of the Phantom of the Opera has always been a somewhat contested subject. LaRue left the original book somewhat ambiguous, but it's been deduced that it probably started in 1881 from hints in the story and things like how long the real-life Paris Opera House has been around. However, from here on it gets a little complicated. The original script for the 1986 Phantom musical noted the date of the prologue as 1911. However, in the Royal Albert Hall production it's announced to be 1905. Assuming the main plot takes place in the same time period as the book, that's kind of depressing and confusing because it means that Christine died really, really young and old man has to sit in a chair for the auction Raoul is like 50 years old tops. The film moved the prologue forward in time to 1919 and the main plot back to 1870, giving Christine a slightly less depressing lifespan and Raoul a reasonable excuse for looking old as balls. This does mean that the events of the story take place 5 years before they finish building the Paris Opera House, but that's not a problem because in this rendition of the story, everything takes place in a completely different, totally fictitious opera house that just happens to be in Paris around the same time period. I couldn't help but notice that the energy levels seem lower across the board in the film. Lines that were belted out in song on stage are just sort of said.
He's there, the Phantom of the Opera!
He's here, the Phantom of the Opera.
Signora!
Now, some of this is the fundamental difference between stage acting and film acting. You would completely rightly tone down some scenes that are now in close-up instead of the mid-distance of a theatre audience. However, there are some occasions where the high energy was kind of essential to the scene. The rendition of Masquerade is a prime example. In the musical, it's a huge, colourful, joyful number with every character in the play singing for all their worth, making it intentionally incredibly jarring when it instantly grinds to a halt the second the Phantom shows up. In the movie, the majority of the singing is left to the identical mask-wearing extras while the main cast just watch or mouth along like kids who didn't want to come to church but know they'll get in trouble if they don't sing the hymns. To compensate for this and get the same effect from the interruption, the film had to resort to sliding into a Dutch angle and drastically changing the lighting mid-shot. Firmin and Andre were always presented as being arseholes, but the film takes it to a whole new level. They spend their first moments at the opera leering at the teenage dancers, make a creepy comment about Meg to her mother, and seem briefly excited that Christine is an orphan and therefore does not have a mother around to object to them sleazing on her until Madame Giry cuts that line of thought off. Slimy and money hungry is one thing, but good lord, did they really have to make them sex offenders too? What the heck is going on with Eric's face in this? I feel silly for complaining about the musical Phantom's only slightly messed up left side now because the part of Gerard Butler's face that isn't under the mask is immaculate. You would have no idea this guy was deformed until you uncovered his whole head. Hell, even once the mask is off, the dreaded birth defect is super underwhelming in this film. I'm pretty sure the Phantom could cover that shit up with some decent foundation. You know, if I were Gerard Butler, I'd probably be a little offended that they kept in all the lines describing what a horrific face he has when in like 90% of the film it's just his face. Ah, good news, Gerard. We'd like to offer you the role of deformed monster in our next movie. Oh man, that's gonna take a lot of makeup. You think so? While there's no particular reason why the old lady who gets into a bidding war with Raoul over the bloody monkey couldn't be Meg Giry, she's not name-dropped in the musical, and Raoul doesn't recognise her as such the way that he does in the film. Meg gets even more to do in the film than she did in the play, as she comes this close to discovering the Phantom's domain while Christine was missing in it, and tries to go with Raoul to rescue her friend in the climax. I almost got the impression that Lloyd Webber wanted to shift the focus onto her just a little bit, but couldn't quite bring himself to do the drastic rewriting of the story that would require, and assume from that he must have really liked Meg as a character. Holy hell did Love Never Dies prove me wrong about that, but that's too deep a rabbit hole to go down right now. I've got to stick to the film. Madame Giry's decade-long inactivity regarding the murderer who lives in the basement was questionable in the musical, but I'd say she's been upgraded to full-on accessory in the film. She helped him escape and took him to the opera house after witnessing him kill his first victim, then on multiple occasions she just stands there and watches while a middle-aged man kidnaps a teenager and actively prevents anyone from finding and rescuing her. Honestly, this reminds me more of the Persian from the book than the Madame Giry of the musical. Her complicity is made far worse by the fact that in this bizarre world, the dancers who work at the opera also apparently live there under her care like it's a boarding school or something, meaning she's basically allowing her charges to be picked off by stranger danger while she does fuck all about it.
I think of her as a daughter also.
Well, you certainly don't act like it, you negligent monster. To top it all, the one nice thing I had to say about her taking over the Persian's role in the musical is undone. She now gives Raoul a cryptic warning to keep his hand at the level of his eye, but for no apparent reason never mentions that this is because the Phantom is mad sick with a lasso and he needs to block it or he'll get strung up like a piñata. The film greatly expands on the 1919 Prologue timeline by regularly jumping back to it in between scenes throughout. Raoul is being driven around Paris looking super depressed about his late wife, and the film even ends on him mourning at Christine's grave. Goodness me, I'm very glad I get this constant reminder that everything is going to get really, really depressing eventually. Thanks, Andrew Lloyd Webber. I'd hate to, enjoy this film. One thing the musical did exceptionally well was utilize stage lighting to imply darkness while still keeping everything visible to the audience, capturing perfectly the gothic aesthetic of the novel. The film went in a different direction, flooding every set with as much light as possible, be they recreating indoors, outdoors, or underground. Well, I guess we know what the Phantom's 20,000 francs a month salary is used for now. Fucking candles! Okay, let's talk about Apollo's Lyre for a second. In chapter 12 of the book, Apollo's Lyre, Eric the opera ghost silently stalks Christine up onto the roof of the opera house and, perched atop a huge lyre clutched in the hands of a statue of the god Apollo, overhears her making secret plans with Raoul to run away and escape him. Now I, like I'm sure many other mildly curious people who remember that the Paris Opera House is a real thing, googled this impressive hiding spot, and yeah, it wasn't exactly what I was expecting. I mean, is the Phantom fucking Spider-Man? How the hell did he get up there without anyone seeing him? Early years of the musical had the guy playing the Phantom atop an angel statue that was slowly lowered over the set, scaring the crap out of the audience when he popped up over its head after the rooftop romance scene. This is another one of those things that the Royal Albert Hall couldn't replicate due to the massive venue and the fact that they had to build all the sets from scratch a few days before production. They settled for having the OG appear over the fancy gilded raised orchestra pit, which honestly works just as well. In the film, however, he, well, you see, the thing is, in the film, the Phantom of the Opera is hiding behind a horse's ass. The terrifying, possibly magical spectre of genius and madness, while stalking the near-helpless embodiment of kindness and virtue he had chosen to make his victim, chose to conceal himself behind a horse's bottom. The appearance of the Phantom as the Red Death is probably my favourite moment of the play. Seeing the OG hold that huge crowd spellbound and helpless with nothing but the sheer force of how fucking intimidating he looks is fucking amazing. The movie Phantom's Red Death costume is, honestly, kind of sexy. I'm pretty sure the only reason people aren't bum rushing him here to deliver mob justice is the fact that he's waving that sword around. Raoul in particular is evidently unimpressed now because he seems fine with leaving Christine unattended for a bit so he can go and get his piece and duke it out with him. The ring that changes hands is once again referenced but also once again changed in context. This time it's Raoul's engagement ring that the Phantom takes in a jealous anger, then Christine makes a gift of as a consolation prize at the end. I don't want this, it's your boyfriend's. You can see that the Phantom had a ragdoll shaped like a monkey when he was a prisoner of the carnival, which I guess explains why he made the music box from the prologue, but still does nothing to explain why it had any significance to Christine, or 30 francs worth of nostalgia to Raoul. Raoul's big brother is cut once again, but it appears that his parents have come back to life in the film, so that's nice. Raoul himself is upgraded yet again. He's not only inoffensive now, he's genuinely heroic at times, sleeping outside Christine's room to try to keep her safe, riding bareback to come to her rescue in the cemetery. Good lord, you have to appreciate a man who's willing to sacrifice his testicles for love, and beating the Phantom in a one-on-one sword fight. Speaking of, oh, that notorious sword fight, besides casting a bad singer to play him, this has got to be the dirtiest thing they done did to the Phantom. Even a sword fetishist like me can't find anything nice to say about this little addition to the plot. It utterly destroys the Phantom's mystique and power and creates a burning plot hole in the next scene where Raoul is explaining his complex plan to capture the man who was just at his mercy. I also can't help but laugh at the idea of this happening between the book versions of these characters and how very, very short a sword fight between a professional assassin and bloodsport gladiator and a spoilt rich boy would be. The Phantom comes on stage to sing with Christine without a cloak hiding his identity this time. So, yeah, get him, boys. He's right there. This was the plan, to lure him out. Look, I know French manners are important, but you really don't need to wait for him to finish singing. Wait, why are these people still back up dancing for him when they can clearly see he's not Piangi? Why are you all just watching this? Shoot him! Shoot him in the face! The motivation for the Phantom's destruction of the chandelier is changed again. Now it takes place much later in the story and is an impromptu distraction to cover the Phantom's escape with Christine. Another huge deviation from the musical is the opera house burning down when the falling chandelier sets the stage on fire. This appears to be in part to punish the more pervy Firmin and Andre, as you can hear them yelling, "Oh no, we're ruined!" as they evacuate. There's a rather sweet moment right at the end of the play when it looks like it's going to end on a note of utter despair and gloom for the OG, but then there's this tiny little slither of happiness because Christine comes back to return his ring to him and they part on almost good terms. This is somewhat ruined in the film because they don't establish her and Raoul leaving. It kind of just looks like the Phantom turned his back on them and assumed they were gone. Firmin and Andre now bring Raoul with them when they introduce themselves at the opera, and contrary to the play, and in an amusing exact opposite to the book, it's now him who doesn't initially recognize her. The opera ghost now has a distinct calling card in the form of a red rose with a black ribbon around it. I actually think this is kind of a nice touch. The Phantom's magical tricks now apparently include Dumbledore's put-outer. The film introduces what's supposed to be a freakish mannequin that's been made to look like Christine that causes her to faint upon seeing it, and quite frankly, yeah, I probably would have too. Not surprisingly, behind the scenes, that's just Emmy Rossum wearing waxy makeup and trying to stand super still. The Phantom has apparently been talking to Christine since the first day she arrived at the opera now, meaning this creepo has been grooming her since she was 8. Eric's sabotage of Carlotta is revealed to be an impressive use of ventriloquism in the book and left completely unexplained in the musical. In the film, the naughty Spectre switches out her mouth spray with something that constricts her throat. Bouquet actually goes looking for the Phantom up on the catwalks, then immediately regrets his decision. I'm not entirely sure what his plan was if Gerard Butler's conventionally handsome face was enough to make him turn and run in fear. There's a new recurring joke about Firmin and Andre having made the money they used to purchase the opera house in the junk business, and Firmin pridefully correcting people that it's scrap metal. Carlotta, portrayed by Minnie Driver, is even more of an eccentric diva than before. She threatens to rage quit before the backdrop falls on her, forcing Firmin and Andre to grovel to keep her from leaving. She's actually kind of amazing in this film. Monsieur Lefebvre, the departing former manager of the opera, has his retirement destination upgraded from Germany to Australia. Apparently he needs an entire planet between him and the opera drama. They show Carlotta mourning over the body of her murdered lover. I mean, I know you're not supposed to like her, but damn, that's just mean. The lake under the opera house is knee-deep now, judging from everyone's ability to wade through it, so I suppose I should have been referring to it as the subterranean puddle. The idea of Eric doing his death from below snorkel siren trick is even funnier in this context. Raoul's defeat at the hands of the Phantom is less embarrassing for him. The opera G pulls a hidden Punjab out from under the water, and Raoul only looks away for a second this time. There's no ambiguity as to the Phantom's fate at the end. He escapes through a handy tunnel, and it's even implied that he outlives Christine despite being significantly older than her. By doing gravestone mathematics, and gosh, this is like the third time this has come up since I missed it in the Harry Potter-a-thon. Anyway, you can deduce that Christine, like the actress playing her, was 16 in the film, which is odd because her age was approximated at being around 20 originally, and usually films age characters up to avoid child labour laws. It also makes me slightly uncomfortable to know that if this film had been made a few months earlier, 2 of these actors would have committed a federal crime by acting in it. Hey guys, room for one more? To my disappointment, my second favourite part of the musical, Raoul making grossed out faces while his fiancée makes out with the Phantom, doesn't get representation in the film. The moment from the musical when Christine finally shed her demure demeanour and stood up to Carlotta is regretfully omitted in the film. They also left out one of the key things that led people to believe that the Phantom might actually be just a little bit genuinely magical in the musical. The moment when the opera singers are grudgingly rehearsing Don Juan Triumphant and the piano starts playing itself and they all seem to be possessed by a dark force that compels them to sing in unison. It's a small thing, but I don't like that they left out the story of young Raoul dashing into the sea to rescue Christine's red scarf the day they first met. I don't know, it was just a cute story, the aristocratic boy who didn't hesitate to get his feet wet for a girl in need. There's a few other things here and there, but largely the film included almost all of the elements of the play in some capacity, which may very well have been its greatest mistake. Final thoughts. So, is this a good adaptation? Well, once again, we're kind of in a situation where you have to define what you mean by good. From a loyalty perspective, it would be hard to ask for more. This film is devoted as hell to the musical. In addition to the plot, dialogue, and lyrics, it follows the same beats, pacing, and structure as the play almost to the second if you cut out time for the set changes. And in doing so, what they were left with was a badly paced film that, due to the casting and directing decisions, just kind of comes off as a bad impersonator of the stage production. This at first seems surprising because, judging from the way that he converted the book to a play, it seemed like Lloyd Webber was quite naturally skilled at knowing how to adjust a story for a new medium. I think the key difference, though, is when the musical was made, that was Lloyd Webber adapting the public domain works of the long-deceased Gaston Leroux, whereas this film is Lloyd Webber adapting the works of Lloyd Webber, and, judging from everything I've seen about the man, Lloyd Webber holds the work of Lloyd Webber in very high regard. What I'm trying to say is, why on earth would I mess with perfection, is the strong vibe that I get from the writing of this film. If you've been keeping up with my show for a while now, you'll know that having to accept that absolute unbending loyalty to the source material isn't a universally good thing has been one of my own real-life personal character arcs. As much as I used to hate admitting it, you can't ignore the fact that books and plays are not films, and you might have to sacrifice some stuff to adapt one into something that people will enjoy watching. I almost feel bad because, after saying all that, I also think that on the few occasions they did add something new, it was inescapably kind of crap. Sorry, I know that's not a very professional way of putting it, it just seemed apt. But hey, the Phantom of the Opera still occasionally tours worldwide, so it's pretty clear it's far too hardy to be killed by a mediocre adaptation. To paraphrase something that Raoul once said about a bloody monkey, it will still play when the rest of us are dead. Thank you for joining me, my my beautiful watchers. I'm sure you're all getting tired by now of being reminded that the YouTube algorithm is a man-made thing of nightmares that will devour channels that don't get lots of likes and comments, but that is still the reality we exist in, so if you wouldn't mind. Also, if you're new here, do consider subscribing so you can stick around for more content. Yo, Eric, play me off. Say you'll share with me one love, one lifetime. Say the word and I will follow you. Share each day with me, each night, each morning. You alone can make my song take flight. It's over now, the music of the night. Much love and appreciation to my patrons of honour, Shelby Hotes and Matthew J. Brish. Once again, a big thank you to Elisa for answering my many Phantom Trivia-related questions. Fun fact, in addition to having her own YouTube channel, she also wrote a book. I have reviewed it and recommend it. Links to where you can get yourself an ebook, paperback, or audiobook version are in the video description. Hello again, my beautiful watchers. I just wanted to take this opportunity to give you a quick reminder that there's a wonderful website called Patreon that's been allowing online producers to actually make a living doing what they do, since apparently YouTube's decided that they shouldn't anymore. Basically, they offer the chance to pledge a certain amount of money per month or per video in exchange for various rewards offered by the creator. There's a variety of stuff you can earn by becoming one of my patrons, including early access to all videos and taking part in that survey you see at the start of every Lost in Adaptation episode. That's actually a very important part of the process, as I use it to gauge how much I'm going to need to explain about the book and the film before I start comparing them. If you decide to become a higher level contributor, your name will be added to the credits that you're seeing right now, and you'll be given the option to join my private chat room so you can regularly talk with me and other patrons. If you're keen enough to join the topmost tier of patronage, you'll earn the most coveted of all the rewards, the chance to pick a future adaptation to be reviewed by yours truly. However, if right now you are thinking, my goodness the Dom, I can't do that, according to the rather unusual laws of my country, I must defeat several alligators in Mortal Kombat before I'm legally allowed to support online content, and I'm afraid my reptilian martial arts are just not what they used to be. Fear not, it would still be a huge help to me if you were to give that like button the old clickaroo, share this episode on social media with perhaps a little recommendation to your friends to check it out, and subscribe if you've not already. It really helps my channel grow and reach new beautiful watchers. I hope you have a most pleasant day, and I will see you in the next episode. Jennifer Ellison, who is the young lady who played Meg Giry, is a Scouser in real life, and I swear sometimes I can hear her real accent coming through, and it's really funny. It's like, here, it's the Phantom of the Opera, let's kick his fucking head in. Is there the Phantom of the Kitty? Beware the Phantom of the Kitty. Your brother's come to rescue you. Don't give me that look, Sir Terry. I told you I was going to have to record in here. You chose to sleep on this cat tower. You can tell I've become a complete crazy cat lady because I am now talking to my cats as if I'm going to get a response. I'm always got to pick you up when you bother me when I'm filming because it does really well on the bloopers. Love you. Decades later, the leading roles were offered to Anne Hathaway and Hugh Jackman. Going through puberty again. Claw on the throat, buddy. Claw on the throat. Could you not? Like, I can't say Andrew Lloyd Webber more than like 3 times without it sounding weird. Andrew Lloyd Webber. Blah, 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 blah. Hello, Andrew Lloyd Webber. I'm very tired.